You may not recognize the name Gilles de Rais, but his story is well documented, one of history's earliest and most disturbing recorded serial killer cases. However, he wasn't like the modern murderers we know, the Bundys, the Dahmers, the Gacys. Gilles de Rais wasn't born in a gutter, nor was he forged by poverty, neglect, or a broken family. He came from immense privilege and nobility, once hailed as a French hero and a companion to Joan of Arc, a man who fought with valor, spoke with refinement, and led with authority. So what could transform such a figure into something utterly inhuman? That is the chronicle of his descent. But be warned, it starts in light and ends in absolute darkness. Born in 1405, Gilles hailed from one of France's most powerful dynasties. His family commanded vast territories, castles, armies, and a fortune that eclipsed some monarchies. But tragedy struck early. His father died in a peculiar hunting mishap, run through by his own lance. His mother, said to be consumed by sorrow, died shortly after. Gilles, barely a boy, was entrusted to his grandfather, a ruthless and calculating man known as Jean de Cron. Jean had no interest in affection. His focus was on legacy. He molded Gilles into a soldier, versed not only in war but in politics, theology, and the art of manipulation. By the time Gilles reached his teens, he was a Latin scholar, a gifted swordsman, and already a veteran of battle. But something colder was taking root beneath the surface. While his peers pursued tournaments and books, Gilles developed a fixation on control, fear, and death. His instructors saw it, as did the castle servants, yet no one uttered a word, not with his family name and the sword at his side. Then, 1429 brought a decisive shift. France was losing ground to England in the 100 Years' War. Morale had plummeted. Cities were capitulating. Then, a teenage girl in armor emerged as if from nowhere. She spoke of visions from God and promised to save France. She was Joan of Arc. And though most of the nobility dismissed her as a madwoman, Gilles did not. He sought her out, fought alongside her, and championed her cause. Together, their victories began to turn the war. Gilles became her staunchest defender, her very shadow. Some suggested he worshipped her, others that he loved her. Whatever the case, when the English captured Joan and burned her at the stake, something inside Gilles fractured. He returned to his lands a hero, but he was hollowed out. And in that emptiness, a new kind of darkness began to sprout. Back on his estates, far from the clamor of battle, Gilles became restless. He wasted his fortune on decadent feasts, gold-threaded robes, musicians, and exotic menageries, along with theatrical plays where he was always cast as the hero. But the wealth ran out. Within a handful of years, Gilles had squandered nearly his entire inheritance. He began selling off land, pawning heirlooms, and making powerful enemies. He was indifferent. He desired something else, something more profound. That's when he delved into alchemy, and not the symbolic sort. Gilles truly thought he could summon demons, forge pacts, and command forbidden powers. He had secret chambers constructed deep beneath his castle. He filled them with arcane sigils, black candles, and books penned in unreadable tongues. He then invited an Italian named Francesco Prelati to join his household. He partnered with an alchemist who professed an ability to commune with demons. The two began conducting occult ceremonies. They offered animal sacrifices, their incantations pleading for riches, influence, and forbidden knowledge. Yet his prayers were unanswered. Frustration drove him to a grim resolution. If lesser offerings were insufficient, he would provide a more significant one. Concurrently, children from the surrounding hamlets started to vanish. At the outset, there were just a few. One young boy vanished en route to the market. A servant's daughter, gone while walking home at twilight. They disappeared without a trace. No remains, no clues, only an empty space. Desperate parents searched frantically. Whispers circulated, but Gilles was a high nobleman, known for lavish parties and eloquent speech. No one would dare implicate a marshal of France. Besides, Gilles had a system. He dispatched loyal retainers to survey the local villages for prospects. They would approach children, mainly boys between 6 and 14, promising work or food, or even schooling at his estate. Impoverished and starving families often consented. The children would depart and were never seen again. Within the fortress walls, Gilles revealed his monstrous true nature. Later testimonies described rooms shrouded in darkness, illuminated only by a single flame. The children were stripped, mocked, and coerced into prayer. Then, his brutal assault began. The acts that followed were unimaginable. He subjected them to horrific torture. Afterward, he ended their lives, sometimes with a blade, sometimes a sword, sometimes protracting the ordeal. He would observe their final moments. He spoke of a spiritual ecstasy, not carnal, as if he were accessing another plane of existence. After the deed, he would incinerate the remains in the main fireplace, discard them in the moat, or hide them beneath the floor. His valet later testified to seeing mounds of bones concealed in the castle's depths. The tally reached dozens, perhaps hundreds, and still his atrocities continued unchecked. For years, Gilles maintained his vile rituals, even composing poetry about his deeds. His verses were elaborate, filled with macabre symbolism and dark allusions. Certain guests of his started to harbor doubts. One nobleman reportedly fled mid-slumber, unsettled by screams. But Gilles' renown, along with his charm and political clout, kept most people silent until he finally erred. A priest, locked in a land conflict with Gilles, was abducted and imprisoned in the castle. This act was entirely separate from the murders, yet it gave the church an opening to launch an official inquiry. Upon their arrival, the evidence they uncovered pointed to something far worse than just heresy. What they found was a horror of a different order. In 1440, the great Gilles de Rais, Marshal of France and hero of Orléans, was arrested. The news spread uncontrollably. For the common folk, the revelation was world-shattering. This was not some minor aristocrat accused of a common crime like theft. This was a national hero, a celebrated warrior, now suspected of killing children. But when the soldiers arrived, Gilles did not waver. He stood with composure, resplendent as always in his velvet attire, and met them with the same cold assurance he once displayed on the battlefield. He viewed the situation as a trivial insult, a plot by envious rivals. He scoffed at them. He declared his name would be cleared within days, and that all would regret besmirching his honor. That confidence would soon evaporate. Testimonies came in a flood, starting with the villagers. Mothers came forward, holding shoes of children who vanished. Fathers were trembling, overcome with anger, recounting how they saw their sons swallowed by the castle, then lost to silence. Then Gilles' own servants, men from inside the fortress, began to talk. They were witnesses to everything. Men whose loyalty had finally shattered. Accomplices who once concealed the crimes now spoke with shaking voices and guilty eyes. One admitted he stood guard while a screaming boy was hauled into a secret room. Another saw Gilles stepping out of the shadows, his body stained with blood, while humming a soft, chilling lullaby. One witness was so broken he could hardly talk. He wept, telling of a day spent scrubbing stone floors until his own fingers bled. And then a different servant mentioned a hidden chest. He whispered about a wooden box he found concealed behind a fake wall. What he discovered inside was a child's severed head, wrapped in linen like a holy relic. He fled the room and was sick. From that day forward, he said, he could no longer pray. But the trial's most ghastly moment came not from a witness, but from Gilles. He didn't scream or deny the charges when they were read. He just listened, dropped his gaze, and then confessed everything. Some scholars claim torture broke his body, which then broke his mind. Others argue the confession was entirely his own choice, a desperate need to unburden his soul. Yet the confession itself was anything but vague. His account was clear, exact, and deeply unsettling. He recounted his selection process and how he trapped the children. He described watching them plead for their lives, their begging for mercy. Their terror filled him with power, like a deity. At this, he smiled. It was a warm, complete smile, as if the memory gave him a sense of peace. He called their final screams beautiful, a moment of pure, soulful truth. Silence fell, then a scream from the crowd. A woman had collapsed. More people fainted. The judges were observed openly weeping in their seats. After that, the trial concluded swiftly, with both church and state in agreement. The verdict was guilty, covering murder but also charges of heresy and dark rituals to summon demons. His sentence was to be death. But a simple execution wouldn't suffice. The crowd demanded a spectacle of fire. On the morning of October 26, 1440, Gilles de Rais was paraded through Naz streets. His white robe signified penance, but his expression was sunken and pale. The onlookers were eerily quiet, not cheering or mocking, but observing. They fastened him to a high gallows next to a great pyre of wood. When offered a priest for confession, he accepted the gesture. His composure finally gave way. He broke into tears. He pleaded not to the crowd but to God for mercy, and then invoked Joan of Arc. He cried that her execution had fundamentally broken him. He claimed his soul was incinerated with hers, leaving something inhuman behind. The pyre was then set ablaze. The fire, it said, moved swiftly, turning robes black. G's final cry wasn't one of mere agony. Observers swore the sound wasn't human, but a high-pitched, otherworldly shriek, like a small bird tangled in razor wire. Many shielded their ears, others fell to their knees in prayer, some simply fled. In an instant, the fiend had vanished, incinerated. His remains dispersed and covertly interred, unmarked and unmourned. The nation attempted to forget. The church erased what it could, and for a while the sanitization held, but not entirely. The Château de Fou remains today. From afar, it blends into the hills of western France, just another medieval shell. Its stones are veiled in moss, its towers battered by time, a ghost of a forgotten era. It draws tourists annually. Visitors trace the time-worn paths and brush their fingers across the historic stonework, posing for photos under archways that once rang with life. The local population, however, speaks of it with grim reluctance. Most avoid the topic because the place feels less like a ruin and more like an open wound, a location caught in a tense silence. Families rooted there for ages claim something is fundamentally amiss. Not haunted, not cursed, just profoundly wrong. Within its walls, the atmosphere is oppressive. A disquieting stillness and a chill permeate the air, even on the warmest days. There are tales of the rooms closing in on solitary visitors, and of daylight vanishing prematurely, as if the fortress itself consumes time. You'll find no memorials for the young victims, no tribute to the stolen lives. Only sanitized histories and guides who cautiously allude to the castle's dark past. Yet the local memory persists, and some say the very stones bear witness. If pressed, they will share accounts from those who sensed an unseen gaze, heard phantom footfalls, or felt a crushing silence in the lower chambers. And they will warn you that lingering too long, straying from the path into darkness, will reveal no spectral lord or knight. Instead, you'll glimpse the truth of him. No phantom, no myth, simply a man. A man who preyed on the innocent, with a name that time failed to erase. The story of Gilles de Rais is a chilling reminder that evil does not always come from darkness. It can grow in the brightest places. Born into privilege, admired as a hero, and once a loyal companion to Joan of Arc, he had everything society often associates with honor and greatness. Yet none of it protected him from the corruption within. This story teaches us that character is not defined by status, wealth, or reputation, but by the choices we make when no one is watching. Power without morality becomes dangerous. Silence in the face of wrongdoing allows evil to grow unchecked. And when pain and loss are left unhealed, they can transform into something destructive. We must learn to look beyond appearances and question even those we admire. More importantly, we must build a society where truth can be spoken without fear, where warning signs are not ignored because of someone's title or influence. In the end, this is not just a story about one man's soukout into darkness. It is a warning to all of us. Humanity is fragile. Without empathy, accountability, and courage, even the brightest light can fade into unimaginable. Thank you for watching. If you found this compelling, please like and subscribe. I hope you'll join me for the next investigation.